Greetings. I am Reverend Kelly X, the Director of Racial Justice Ministries at Spirit Bennett Center, and I am so honored to welcome you to another episode of Conversation at the Intersection. It's a podcast that I do that allows us to have a real conversation about how faith and justice intersect with our identities and how they actually help us to move towards a more beautiful community, a beloved community. And today I have the honor of having Miss Briana Perry, the Executive Director of Healthy and Free Tennessee, with me today. Can I First of all, thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me on today and to share a bit about yourself and about your organization. And so, if you could, can you tell me a bit of like what do you do and why?
Yeah, well, first, thank you so much for the introduction, Kelly. I'm so excited to be having this conversation with you and so grateful that we've been connected for a few years now, all the way back to
Yeah.
the Nucleus Council Nashville days. Yeah, just thank you again for inviting me to be on to talk about the work that I do. So I think it might be helpful or it's important to share a little bit about my journey and the work that I do day health Tennessee. So I'm originally from Memphis and I came to Nashville for college. I went to Vanderbilt, and when I was an undergraduate student majoring in sociology and gender studies, I started
Mm,
to learn more about reproductive oppression. I read a chapter in Women, Race, and Class by Angela Davis, where she kind of gets into the history of the control movement and the racism
mhm,
that was spread throughout that movement. And so from that,
mm,
I was really fired up and moved back to Memphis to teach and got connected to groups who were doing work around racial justice, sexual assault prevention work, and also reproductive freedom. And so this was back
mm,
in 2013, 2014. And during that time period, I got connected to Healthy and Free Tennessee. So I've been connected to the organization in some capacity, like first as a volunteer, then a cancer, then I was on the steering committee, and now I'm on staff. So I've been connected in some way since 2014. So almost
mm,
11 years now. And so Healthy and Free Tennessee is a statewide reproductive justice organization working at the intersections of race, class, and gender to grow the movement. And we are
mhm,
really looking at the connections between reproductive justice, the criminal legal system, and white supremacy, and how we
mhm,
can fight back or push back against harmful structures as we think about creating the communities, creating the systems, the relationships that we need to build out sustainable communities and ensure that people have access to comprehensive sexual and reproductive health care services. And so that is essentially what we do. And my day to day can look differently depending on time of year. We are like coming upon the end of the legislative session, and so that's what my work has been focused on for the past few months now.
Can you said the last few months you've been working on, did you say becoming, I want to make sure I heard you right. Did you say becoming an elected official or did I hear you?
Oh, I was saying that my day to day looks differently depending on the time of year. And so right now we are kind of coming upon the end of the legislative session. And so a lot of the
Okay.
work that I've been focused on is tied to the legislative session since January.
Okay. Okay. I was like, wait a minute. I was excited. I was like, Brianna Perry's running for something. I mean, I get
Oh,
to
no,
vote for
absolutely
Brianna
not.
Perry.
No.
I,
Uh-uh.
I clearly heard you wrong. I was ready. Know that I. But anyway, so one of the things that she said that is that you all are a reproductive justice organization. Can you talk to me and to us about the difference between reproductive justice and reproductive rights?
Yes, of course. Reproductive rights, and what I like to start off by saying, that is usually what people are thinking about. That's what comes to mind when they hear repro. So like the imagery in the media is very much so connected to the reproductive rights movement, a movement that's
Mm-hmm.
typically centered the interests of white women, white people, and for a long time was narrowly focused on the right to abortion. So thinking about after the Roe v. Wade decision in 1973,
Mm-hmm.
and the movement that really pushed for that decision, and then also what happened afterwards around like
Mm-hmm.
legalizing abortion and thinking about access to other sexual care and resources and services. And so in the 80s, and specifically in 1989, a group of Black women came together and they released this brochure or sorts, or just like this ad saying that, like, hey, African American women are for reproductive freedom. And that was very much so trying to highlight the ways that Black women's experiences had been erased, overlooked, not included in this larger
Mm-hmm.
like fight and conversation around reproductive rights. And so from that in 1994, a group of Black women, a group of 12 Black women built upon that statement. And this was during the Clinton administration, and the Clinton administration doing healthcare reform. And so, as a part of that reform, and to appease conservative legislators, they very much so had taken out so much around access to different services, including sexual and reproductive health care services, and abortion
Mm-hmm.
was missing in a big way. And these women say, like, hey, as we think about this conversation that's been happening, this movement, a lot of it has been like focused on like the right to abortion, but we know that there are so many things that impact a person's ability to access services uh, when it comes to like the decision to maintain or terminate a pregnancy. There are like histories that are at play, there are policies that are at play,
Mm-hmm.
there are just like these other issues that are deeply connected. So access to health care for sure, but housing, environmental justice, what's going on in an environment that like impacts a person's reproductive life, and then also their ability to raise children in safe, healthy, and sustainable communities. And so, very much so, that is when the reproductive justice framework was developed, and movement really was built out.
Mm-hmm.
And so reproductive rights is focused on just like having the right to services, and reproductive
Yeah.
justice is a movement building like a framework and approach to those services, and really is asking the question, what does it mean to have the right to something if you don't have access? And we know historically marginalized groups of people, Black communities have not had access to these resources and services, dating back to like the legacy of chattel slavery. And so
Right.
reproductive justice is really centering those histories, is centering the reproductive oppression, and it's really connecting the fight for sexual and reproductive healthcare services, as some folks
Mm-hmm.
like to say, really connecting like that fight and this um, work around abortion care to social justice and these larger issues that again go along with trying to access abortion care. So it's like this merging of abortion rights and social justice to be more expansive, and to really speak to the needs of communities, and not be limited to like, oh, my body, my choice, but like choice being very complicated, and again is so
Mm-hmm.
deeply connected to larger structural forces and other social justice issues.
Yeah, and also like what my understanding has been, what is the capacity that I have to be able to actually raise a
Mhm,
child in this.
mhm,
And so do have access to healthy, affordable foods? Will the schools that my child, if I give birth, be able to be something that is really teaching and cares about them holistically? Is it actually going to
Mhm.
provide the safe education that we want them to have? And when you start to think about housing, food, jobs, all of the things that come into play when you are ready to have a family, and those things aren't in place, it's going to be more
Mhm.
difficult to sustain that. And that's a yeah. And so then you've got to work on society. You've got to look at the beloved community when thinking about having it. One of the things that I also understand about reproductive justice, that it is also focused on not just whether or not, like you said, to have an abortion, but also the access to be able to have children. And that some women, when we think about African American women, for not having access to in vitro or having access
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
care that would allow them to strengthen their ability to have children, whether it is simple gynecological procedures that would just make it easier once those simple issues might be addressed, or even the more expensive things that we think about are, thousands of dollars in order to have a child, but to be able to have
Mhm.
access to it, that it's not just something for people of wealth to have.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so the core tenets of reproductive justice, the human right to have children, like what you're getting into, Kelly, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do want to maintain a pregnancy, what are the resources that are available to you? So thinking about access to midwifery care, doula care, fertility care, which we know is under attack in so many places, and the
Mm-hmm.
conversations in Tennessee are scary. They're terrifying. The other core tenet is the human right to not have a child. So thinking about not only the ability to terminate a pregnancy, but access to comprehensive sex ed, which is missing in Tennessee public schools. So
Mm-hmm.
having the information to
Mm.
make informed decisions. Body having access to birth control and thinking about the full range or full scope of birth control options that best align with your needs. And then the human right to raising children and families in healthy, sustainable communities. And like what you're pointing out, Kelly, so like there's a conversation we need to have about jobs, about food, about education, about the environment, about
Mhm.
like labor and and how we think about that expensively. And then the last tenet that was included after the framework was developed in 1994 is the human right to bodily autonomy, free from all forms of oppression. So thinking
Yeah.
about queer and trans liberation as well, and not only queer and trans folks becoming parents, but how a lot of these issues, especially thinking about reproductive oppression, come down to like who gets to exist freely in their body, who gets to become a parent, who gets to have sex because the state tries to regulate and control that. And so that last tenant really
Mhm.
gets it like, hey, like in order to move toward a world where we're able to actualize reproductive justice, we have to be clear that we're working to dismantle white supremacy, we're working to dismantle transphobia, we're working to
Yeah.
dismantle capitalism as well.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's it. You mentioned two things that I want to talk about. I'm thinking about one. Well, the main thing is that you brought up Tennessee
Mhm.
and being in Tennessee, and what does it mean to be having an organization? What does it mean for healthy and free Tennessee to exist in Tennessee, a state that does not offer comprehensive sex education in schools, a state that has removed the right for people who can get pregnant to access abortion, a
Mhm.
state that has folks who are working um, constantly to try to figure out how to remove access to contraception. And so I'm really interested in what work does Health and Free Tennessee do in with the state or combating the state against the state, like to able to make sure that the entire state of Tennessee, which takes you 8 hours to go from the east to the west across, has access to, or at least that people are informed about their rights and
Hmm.
reproductively.
Yeah. So as we are focused on expanding access to comprehensive sexual and reproductive health care services, we also
Mm-hmm.
are really centering, pushing back against the criminalization of pregnancy outcomes and the criminalization of
Uh,
parenting. And we see this as a continuum. And as someone once told me when I first was coming into reproductive justice work, that it's important for us to think about, and that's why I really appreciate the reproductive justice framework and especially that last tenet, because when we think about just a person's life, the fullness of their life. So a person might be trying to access abortion one day, and the next day, weeks later, a month later, they are trying to start a family. And what are the supports and resources that are available to them? And we see
yes.
that the same rhetoric that goes into restricting abortion care, access to comprehensive sexual and reproductive health care services, that's the same logic and rhetoric that's going into criminalizing parenting and determining who gets to be a parent. And we see that with the like family policing that happens, and just how parents are separated from their children even before like that starts even before like the birthing happens. So we
Mm-hmm.
really are looking at that, and the work that we take on, the legislation that we focused on, is really trying to get at that. Like, how do we push back, and how do we imagine new ways of being, even in a state like Tennessee, even in a state like Tennessee, where the political climate is so intense and it continues
Mm-hmm.
to be like intensified, and people's material conditions are worsening. We know that. We know what's been happening in rural communities and hospital closures and what access has looked like, and people having to drive
Yeah.
long distance to get care, period, but especially trying to get sexual and reproductive health care services. And so something that we've been working on, some things that we've been working on in the past few years has included doula care and working to expand access to doula care. So we know that Tennessee's maternal mortality rates mirror what's happening nationally, that Black women are disproportionately impacted by maternal mortality, and they are dying at rates twice, three times that of white women and Latina women. And we saw that most recently in the 2024 Maternal Mortality Review Committee report. And so we know that one way to intervene and not like be the solution or be all, and do us are very clear about that the issue is
Mm-hmm.
systemic. The issue is medical racism, and we have to be invested in tackling that. And as a way to intervene, doulas and research shows that having a doula in the room can significantly improve birth outcomes. And so
Yeah.
we have been working on expanding care to doulas and really holding the goal of doulas being eligible for Medicaid reimbursements. Last year, we worked on expanding access to contraception because we know how things were currently, or how things were working before the legislation we were advocating for. People were being dispensed like a certain amount of contraception, specifically birth control pills at a time. So a doctor might write a 12-month prescription, but folks are getting it in
Mm-hmm.
increments. And that could be a huge problem for folks living in rural communities and having that care interrupted and not having the resources they need if they are trying to prevent a pregnancy. Can be a huge deal if like they aren't able to get that prescription and end up in a situation where like an unintended pregnancy happens. And so last
Mhm.
year we were able to advocate for legislation that it's a 12-month supply of birth control to care recipients, and continuing to work on that to expand it to everyone. But really grateful
Mhm.
that we were able to see it happen for 10 care recipients. And again, that's huge when we think about people living in rural communities. So that's something else
Mhm.
that we've been working on. And as far as people just knowing, what's going on, because we know trying to go to the state capitol can be so inaccessible. Just like how things are structured, parking, where parking lots are located. Parking is very expensive. You have to take time off work to go and meet with
Mhm.
legislators and go to those committee hearings. So we try to make that process as accessible as possible and sharing information in ways that communities can access. So each year we put together a comprehensive reproductive justice policy watch list and just highlight the bills that are of interest to us that we want to share with community. So bills that are either expanding reproductive justice or like infringing upon people's reproductive autonomy. And we do
Yeah.
an annual day on the hill. We just had that day on the hill a few weeks ago. And last year, because people have like come to us and like, hey, we know these bills and we're pushing back against it. We understand the legislative process and why advocacy can be a helpful intervention. And we do want to frame it as that. Like, we don't see like advocacy, well, policy work specifically related to advocacy as the solution. We see policy as being able to support grassroots organizing, because we see grassroots
Mhm.
organizing is needed to build power, as what will build power and shift people's material conditions. But policies can provide some needed material relief, and that's why we do that work. But folks have like come to us and say, hey, I'm just someone who's living in East Tennessee, and
Mhm.
I'm watching the pregnancy watch list. But if something comes up, like if someone is pregnant and they are trying to terminate a pregnancy, what do I do? Because we know that folks are experiencing criminalization, and so we developed a teaching. It's called "Not Your Pregnancy, Not Your Business," and so we've been able to do this
Mhm.
teaching in different parts of Tennessee. We're in East Tennessee. We've done it in Middle Tennessee, working our way to West
Mhm.
Tennessee. And we see this as like practical tools for folks to like think about resource management and supporting their loved ones, so they're not up in the legal system and criminalized for their pregnancy outcome.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome because one of the things that we're hearing so much about what women who who have found themselves in the midst of a miscarriage
Mhm.
being afraid to go to the doctor to get the help that they need. Also, you've got doctors afraid to help women because they don't want to also
Mhm.
be criminalized either. And so everybody's afraid to get help. And in the midst of that, that women's lives are at risk and women
Mhm.
are dying because
Mhm.
um, because the laws are vague and you don't know who's going to prosecute, and the idea that other people are watching
Mhm.
and that they
Mhm.
are so close to what's happening in everybody else's body and not really aware of those things. That can be definitely terrifying. One of the things that part of the reason that I do the work that I do with racial justice ministries, and part of the reason I do this podcast is that, like, I really believe that justice is tied to faith, that there is a moral
Mhm.
obligation for
Mhm.
us to live and to be just, and to create ways of justice, and when as I say justice, I'm not saying punishment. I want to be
Yeah.
clear,
Yeah.
not
Mhm.
just condemning people, but creating spaces where folks can have freedom and thrive. And I hear
Mhm.
you doing this work of reproductive justice in that same way. Can you speak about it in a way that either connect your faith, if you feel comfortable talking about personally, or like just how it is a faithful act to be a part of reproductive justice and have helping people be connected, um, both to have access, but also I will also say this, and I'm you don't even have the right to pleasure in their own bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Mhm. Yeah, and the pleasure, like, piece is huge. Before the
Hmm.
onset of the pandemic, Healthy and Free hosted statewide convenings to bring together different like stakeholders, community members, organizations across the state. And there were some people who attended who were connected to a national organization or just in the southeastern region to
Hmm.
center conversations around reproductive justice. And the second year we did, we had a like pre-conference session and we partnered with Afrosexology, and very much so I think they might have taken a pause with their work, but they have just lots of resources on their social media, and I very much so want
Hmm.
to lift that up as a resource. And the
Yeah.
conversation that convened in that particular year was centered on pleasure, because as we think about the criminalization that we experience, the surveillance that we experience, the targeting,
Yeah.
we want to uplift, like, hey, like, like, we can experience joy. That's our birthright. We can experience pleasure, and very much so want to uplift like Audre Lorde's work around that, and that's come up in different reproductive justice spaces. Like, what does it
Hmm.
look like the sort of erotic and pleasure, and how we can find pleasure just in our external world, but how do we really center that internally and live a pleasure filled life? So just want to speak to that as well. And as far as how I think about this, as a person who is really centering my spiritual journey in a new way, really leaning
Hmm.
into construction and something at Healthy and Free's first statewide convening in 2017. Sharice Scott said this, and she's the CEO at Sister Reach, and they are really centering the connection between faith and reproductive justice. But
Hmm.
she said
I
this
love it.
during a plenary session, and it stayed with me. And she said, "This is sacred work because we are sacred beings." And as I think
Yeah.
about that, as someone who's, trying to ground myself in a faith that's not tethered to white supremacy, it's not the
Yeah.
faith that I grew up with and what that looks like
Mm.
today. And that
Yeah.
is something, when I think about that, when I like visualize it, when I think about it in practice, it's very much so rooted in care, it's rooted in compassion and reciprocity,
Yeah.
interdependence. And these values are also important movement values and important values in reproductive justice work. And so when we lead with care, when we lead with compassion, and seeing how um, our connection to our bodies, how that is deep tied to a fundamentalist interpretation of the Bible and a fundamentalist like faith practice, and how that's like
Mm.
deeply grounded in white supremacy. When we push back
Right.
against that, we see what is possible. And for me, that is reproductive justice. There it's these other um, like systems rooted in care and liberation and humans being able to reach their full potential. And to me, that's deeply tied to us like being uh, connected to like a higher power, us being able to connected to a spirituality or a set of spiritualities that's getting at that as well. And so something
Yeah.
that I've actually talked about with my husband Denzel, because as folks like kind of approach with work from the vantage point of and often come in very much so like scarred and harmed from a very harmful faith practice. Something that he
Mm.
reminds me of, especially as we think about decolonialism, and I'm someone who's like trying to lean more into decolonial Black feminism. There are traditions from our ancestors, like how they fought back against systems, how they tapped into their radical imagination, and all of that is deeply
Mhm.
rooted in spirituality. And so
Yeah.
I think about reproductive justice and like where I'm at spiritually as like a reclamation of sorts. That's me tapping
Yeah.
into my ancestral wisdom and
Mhm.
leaning into more possibilities when I think about like the divine and how going back to what Cherie Scott said, that this is sacred work, this is divine work because we're sacred beings.
Yeah. I think also what happens when we decolonialize our faith and our way
Mhm.
of being, one of the things that white supremacy does for all people, it causes us to
Mhm.
despise our bodies,
Mhm.
and um, to always pick it apart to whether or not it's good enough and
Mhm.
keep wanting it to be better in that way. And and what can happen as you despise your body, then you despise what bodies do. We despise the pleasure
Mhm.
that happens in bodies, and then but we, while at the same time having this desire to create more bodies, but creating
Mhm.
it without a knowledge of how bodies are made, right? And so,
Mhm.
which then takes away the pleasure and makes pleasure in and of itself. And to reclaim our bodies, to love our bodies, to be learning to love ourselves more deeply. What it does is it creates space
Mhm.
for us to have community where, as I love my body, then I need to love the space that is around it. I need to, loving my body
Mhm.
requires the making sure that I am feeding my body well. And thus, I want
Mhm.
to make sure that I have access to healthy food. And also, loving my body means also loving your body and making sure
Mhm.
that your body
Mhm.
has what it needs. Not just so that our bodies can come together, maybe, but even beyond that, a real sense of really loving of our neighbor comes out of that
Mhm.
sense of truly
Mhm.
loving my neighbor as I love myself.
Yes.
And
Uh-huh.
it becomes this embodied way of being in the world. And for me, that makes me think back to when you started talking about an important piece of our productive justice is being in alignment with LGBTQ people and making sure that there is space
Mhm.
for them to live to be in the world and also thus experience pleasure. Because I think one of the things that is happening
Mhm.
in particular um, towards trans folks, to the erasure of trans folks, is an attempt to, it's a slow attempt to go back to the erasure of queerness in general. And if we
Mhm.
can get rid of one group, we can eventually build to this other space. And not wanting that to
Mhm.
happen requires there to be space for there to be joy and love
Mhm.
and peace, that there is a space in which folks get to exist in freedom. And I don't know if we often are recognizing when we're so busy stuck in a mindset that others, that we forget
Mhm.
that as others we're also othering ourselves in the process. Can you talk about the work that you all do within queer communities to for reproductive justice rights?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, as I shared with that last tenet of reproductive justice, the human
Mhm.
right to bodily autonomy, free from all forms of oppression, for us, that looks like how are queer and trans folks connecting to these conversations around uh, sexual and reproductive healthcare services, because queer and trans folks are often erased, or people are like, oh no, like people who are queer and trans aren't trying to uh, expand families or start families. And we also
Yes.
think about the history when it comes to the reproductive oppression that queer and trans folks experience. So when we think about the experimentation that happened on like enslaved Black women
Mhm.
and like poor women. That also was the case for queer and trans folks as well. And that history has just
Mhm.
been erased. So some of what we do is try to uplift that and think about like, hey, when it comes to whatever reproductive and sexual healthcare decision, how are we
Mhm.
centering people who have been on the margins? How are we centering as folks who have been excluded, who have been
Right.
targeted and continue to be targeted? And so I know like language comes up a lot in our work and just reproductive justice overall. And we've just really have taken time to understand and see like the power of language when we are using language that holds fullness of people's experiences. How people, it's important for folks to see themselves in this work, in this movement. And so we have done different work and connected with different artists, especially when we've done just communications campaigns where we're representing the diversity of experiences when it comes to parenting. We are, really
Mhm.
thinking about our language to support folks in seeing themselves in this work. We also have, like on the other side of that. So yes, like thinking about like the supports and making space for queer and trans folks to be a part of this work and to think about being able to, or not think about, but being able to access services related to their sexual and reproductive health care, and being able to start the families, to create families they're choosing. That's a part of it. Another part is trans and queer folks being able to exist as themselves. So, Healthy and Free
Right.
convenes a statewide repro coalition, and we developed this vision statement together as a coalition 2 years ago. And one piece of the vision is around bodily autonomy, and it speaks to like queer and trans folks being able to exist freely in their bodies. And so when we think about the legislation that is attacking trans people, like young trans people, thinking
Mhm.
about like queer people not being able to, and this goes back to like the creating families piece, but not being able to adopt families, adopt children, not being able
Mhm.
to just access basic needs because of
Yeah.
legislation that's being
I've
passed.
got
And so
friends.
we've intervened, yeah, on that as well, and have like worked to push back against those policies, to
Mhm.
really think about yeah, like how do we center queer and trans people being able to fully exist as themselves, and how are we as a movement working to, and as an organization working to not have that as like a side conversation, but it being core, it being central to like what we are uplifting in our work, the stories that we are centering, the people who are, a part of our youth leadership council, on our steering committee, centering queer and trans folks leadership, and then also like how we are never like forgetting that we need to, like, as we think about expanding services that have to queer and trans folks as well, and then able to access services, as we know they're disproportionately impacted by being targeted and not being able to have the care that they need to make decisions related to their bodies and families.
Yeah, we forget that when those who have most difficulty getting access to what they
Mhm.
need are able to get what they need, all of us
Mhm.
get to. And so yeah, that makes complete sense. I have a couple that I married who
Mm.
were in the process have tried IVF a couple of times, and one of the things that was so difficult for them is that they could not that one of the wives had health care that covered IVF.
Mm.
They could not
Mm.
access IVF because one of the precursors to get to use use IVF in the healthcare through their healthcare was that they had to try to get pregnant, and they needed so many months of trying to conceive.
Mm.
Well, as two women, I mean, it's like I guess they could try to
Mhm.
conceive, but they don't meet the qualifications, and so they have had to only pay out of pocket
Mhm.
for maybe 3 rounds of IVF, which is devastating
Mhm.
and difficult
Yes, yes.
and expensive. Very,
It's so
very, very
expensive.
expensive.
Yes.
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 And yeah, it's just it's wild. So
Mm.
my question then is, what can we do to help? Like, what can those listeners, those viewing, watching this right
Mhm.
now, how can we support reproductive justice work here in Tennessee?
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for that question. It comes up so much, and I one try to first start by sharing that, like, even in such a like feels like super repressive environment, there's so much hope, and I have so much
Hmm.
optimism about what's happening and what continues to be possible, because I do think we like see the attacks, we're experiencing the attacks. So going back to like
Hmm.
um you're talking about IVF and the couple that you married. So it's hard to get gender affirming care, just like affirming care that is affirming your gender identity, your sexuality, period. But
Yeah.
especially in
Yeah.
Tennessee, and we, have seen, there are different institutions that are willing to turn over information and collaborate with the state that's putting people at harm's
Yep.
way. And so, those things continue to make national news. And even in that, especially as Healthy and Free is entering a period of newness. We wrapped up a rebranding process in December of this past December. We have a new logo. The logo is the Okoe, also known as the Passion Flower. And for
Mhm.
us, like, we want to be fully grounded in our place-based work. Tennessee is home, and as Tennessee, it's such a tough place to do this work. We are clear that we are following in the pathway footsteps of our ancestors who did incredible organizing in Tennessee and the South as a whole. And so that is who shoulders we stand on. That is who has like set the blueprint for us, and we just try to hold that as a north star. Sometimes we say south star to not always center the north. That
Come
like
on.
there was so much that was in the midst of such intense conditions, thinking about chattel slavery, thinking about Jim Crow, and there's so
Yeah.
much that they did, so much power that they built, and that continues to be
Mhm.
so in Tennessee. So I do want to say that because I know it could be a lot of doom and gloom, and we want to be clear. We want to have a sober assessment of what is happening, and we also want to be clear that we can build power, that we are building power, and they can like organize that we can do this, and we have little examples of that. A few years ago,
Mhm.
Healthy and Free had secured like a really huge win around um, intervening in abortion criminalization. And
Mm.
so a reporter wrote an article, and we loved the headline. It was like, this is what it looks like to be in Tennessee, to be a repro organization in Tennessee, a small one at that. And this is what it looks like
Yeah.
to still win. So like lead with thinking about like how people can get involved. So
Mhm.
that's something like holding that optimism again, like being clear about what's happening, but there is so
Mm.
much. Also leading with that. So we encourage folks to get connected to us, going on our website at healthyandfreetn.org. I'm up to be on our list to keep to be in the loop, to receive updates about the work, volunteer opportunities, upcoming events. We're so
Mhm.
excited to continue to do the and that I mentioned, to share practical tools with folks to intervene in pregnancy criminalization. We're excited
Mm.
about our recent Poverty is Not Neglect campaign, and we'll be doing work around that this summer. Excited about a bill connected to this campaign that is, making its way through the legislature as a start to ensure that conditions related to poverty are not seen as child neglect, and that we are centering resources and support for parents, because that's what really is needed. And folks can plug into that and get connected. We are doing a
Mm.
summer political education series. Encourage folks to tune in our Instagram as well. So if folks follow us on Instagram, just at Healthy Free TN. You can just see that happening, and all you have to do is tune in. We're going to be talking about public benefits. We're going to be talking about fertility care, and we're going to be talking about just the criminalization that happens around parenting in general. So I just wanted to
Mm.
uplift that, and just yeah, like there are like other organizations that folks can get connected to, and oftentimes it just is like coming to that one thing and thinking about your capacity and thinking about the contribution that you are best positioned to make, and offering it to
Yeah.
the space. That's something that I always like to lift up, because sometimes especially in this moment, people are like, "Oh,
Mhm.
it's so much happening. Where do I start?" Or like, "Do I get connected to organizations?" And I say, like, no, like it's not necessarily feasible, but you can offer something. You can offer an important contribution. So it can look like a variety of things, and there are so many ways to get involved with groups. As of lately, we've been thinking a lot about healing justice and artists, because people come to us and like, hey, like I'm an artist, and or I'm doing this, and this is just kind of my focus. And it's like, yeah, you can do artwork for like a lot of things that we're trying to work on.
Mhm.
Like that aspect is so important. So that's something too that we like to uplift. But getting involved with us directly, people can just go on our website, get on our listserv, and there are upcoming opportunities for folks to connect to and be a part of community. Because I will say that's like the other piece that's been really big for us. For our rebranding, and we have a celebration that's coming up to fully launch it. But we wanted to like really center like, okay, there's so much isolation that's happening. How can we
Yeah.
recenter as we are trying to lean more into decolonialism? How can we recenter connection, community, and folks coming together and knowing that they're not alone? So that's something
Mhm.
else that it's been very important to us. And folks can come in and we meet you where you're at, and we're trying to learn and grow, and be in the spirit of reciprocity. It's not just like what you can do for us or like what we have to give. Like we want to really be in a spirit of reciprocity and center people's talents and contributions.
Awesome. That's awesome. That means so we need to go to healthyfreetn.org, get logged in, go to Instagram, follow them, and do all of that. That's absolutely amazing. And I want to thank you for joining me today on Conversations at the Intersection. Before we wrap up, can you give one call to action or maybe something that will be inspirational that can keep us moving as we look towards a world where reproductive justice is available for all people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So two things. One, I want to thank you, Kelly, not just for this platform and having these conversations, but like what a gift, what a treat it is for me to see someone really trying to put into practice what it looks like to
Mm,
build that beloved community, what it looks like to be like walking in faith, what it looks like to be centering liberatory values in the South.
mm,
And so, going back to what I said about like, there's so much, especially in this space around like we're talking about like maintaining pregnancies, terminating pregnancies, and we know like this religious rhetoric around abortion in the South and
mhm,
in other places in the country. And I just really appreciate what you're doing and just how you're making these different connections and centering love and joy.
yeah,
It's just so heartwarming. So I just want to uplift that. And as far as a call to action, one thing that I come back to because Healthy and Free is trying to like with the criminalization and targeting and surveillance, we're trying to really connect our work to the abolitionist movement. And I come back to what Miriam Kaba says, hope being disciplined is something that you have to, do work for and put in the time and energy. Like not that hope is like the strategy, but like, hey, we can practice hope. We can choose even as these systems are trying to crush us, they are trying to kill us, we can choose to be hopeful, we can choose to have a practice around hope and commit to
mm,
that as a discipline, as something that we wake up every day and we choose hope, we wake up every day
mm.
and we choose
That's
love,
good.
we wake up every day and we choose compassion, and those are
Mm,
things that like can't be taken away from us. Those are the foundational elements of a movement, of the reproductive justice movement. So that's something I return to even in moments when it's hard, days that it's hard, that I can choose to practice hope. That they can't take that away from me, and I
yeah.
just want to say they can take that away from us.
That is so good. And that is confirmation. I've been working on a training about social justice as a spiritual practice. And so
Mhm,
choosing hope every morning in spite of what is happening, because
mhm,
I believe that God is the God of the oppressed. And so
mhm,
we have to be
mhm,
working to remove oppression from oppressed folks. And
mhm,
that's the work that it is. And to be able to do that requires hope of a possibility, hope of a better possibility. You have to lean into love. You've got to lead with faith, and that's not always easy, but it is
mhm,
what is required if we're
mhm,
going to create the world that we want to live in. And so I am
mhm.
inspired to have you with me today, Briana. Thank you so much for your work with
Absolutely.
Healthy and Free. I said fair and free. Healthy and Free Tennessee. Thank you for what you
Mhm.
do. Let it be healthy, free, fair, just all of it. We
Yeah,
want Tennessee to be
yeah, and
all of
pleasure
it.
field, don't forget pleasure.
Yes,
Mhm,
and pleasure. Yes, yes,
mhm,
yes. Thank you for helping us create a sexual ethic that includes pleasure, because I think that is so important for us. Um, And so I want to thank you for this. I want to thank you all for watching,
Yeah.
coming again this week
Mhm.
to Conversations at the Intersection. Remember that we are always finding ways to find where our faith and justice meet, and understanding that
Mhm.
our identities are beneficial to that process and create a beloved
Mhm.
community. Thank you for joining me on today. You have a blessed day.